Good afternoon. Happy Earth Day, everybody. And Senator Embarrasses will be joining us shortly. He's going down to vote. And I'm very excited to have my colleagues here with me today to talk about something that's on, I think, a lot of people's minds in terms of our aging infrastructure, our infrastructure, roads and bridges, and other things that we see in our home states that need help. And this is something that Congress has done for many, many years together on a bipartisan basis. Our focus today is to say what our concepts are as Republicans, as what infrastructure means, what our principles are in terms of pay-fors, and then say to President Biden and his team and our Democrat colleagues, we're ready to sit down and get to work on this. I think that's probably the biggest message we want to put forward today, is that this is important to us. So let's define infrastructure. You can see here our definition of infrastructure, and we've talked a lot about this: core infrastructure, physical infrastructure. What do people think of in our states when they think about infrastructure? And so I'll go through them briefly. Roads and bridges, public transit systems, rail, which could be cargo, passenger rail, water and wastewater. I'm going to stop there for a minute to say that the first part of this infrastructure package could be come up in front of the entire Senate next week, and hopefully will, with the EPW bill on clean drinking water and wastewater that we passed out unanimously. Every Republican, every Democrat voted for this. Ports and inland waterways, airports. Broadband is the infrastructure that, if you'd ask us this question 10 years ago, we probably wouldn't have thought to do it, or if we had, we would have been very futuristic and been able to see what the great needs would be. But broadband is an essential and core infrastructure package. And lastly, water storage and safety. I think it's important for you all to realize that this is the largest infrastructure investment that Republicans have come forward with. This is a robust package when we look at where we're focusing our infrastructure needs. The funding levels and the principles are meant to guide us. And then we would say, and I would say, now's the time for the committees to get to work. And that's why I think it's really important to note that the folks that are here with me today, Senator Crapo can't join, are the ranking members of the relevant committees that would be moving forward a robust infrastructure package. I've done a lot of outreach to my fellow Republicans. I've talked to Democrats. I've talked to my committee chair, Senator Carper, more than a few times. And I've talked with the White House, which many of us have. Some of us have been down to the White House to talk directly with the president, but we've certainly been talking about how important this is for a 21st century that has forward-looking, innovative infrastructure. So we agree that these bills are necessary, and that the committees of jurisdiction should be the ones that force the compromise and forge the great policies that we need to make sure that we're meeting this challenge. So for that to happen, I think also, as I've lined out what infrastructure is, you can see the amount of dedicated funds to a total of about $568 billion as where we would see a great way for us to express what we think the need over 5 years would be in these categories. We also have concepts of principles of how to pay for this. And some of my colleagues will talk about this, but I think it's important that you know that some of the ideas that we have for pay-fors, and this would be fully paid for, and that's critical, I think. That's critical. We need to cover the cost of the infrastructure bills to avoid increasing the debt. We all believe that. We need to shore up any infrastructure-related trust funds that's facing revenue shortfall. That does not mean raising the gas tax. That means looking at user fees and other users of our infrastructure that to this point have not or pay very little in terms of the wear and tear that they particularly move forward on our roads and highways. I'm talking about electric vehicles, hydrogen, hybrids, and those kinds of things. We've also heard a lot of talk about other things like a VMT. We've talked about that in committee. No commitments there at all. We're basically just lining out our principles. Another principle that we think is really important is to repurpose dollars that have already been appropriated. there's two specific ways, and I think Senator Toomey will talk about this as well, and knows very much, and it really actually gave me the idea of this, and that is to repurpose some of the unspent dollars from COVID that are no longer considered an emergency that can help us devote to infrastructure. You may recall I had an amendment to that effect when we did the COVID bill to say, let's repurpose a lot of these dollars to infrastructure where it's mostly needed, knowing we were going to have a shortfall in the Highway Trust Fund. The other way would be to say to cities, counties, and states to open it up to, the availability of COVID dollars for them to be able to make matches or pay for infrastructure. And so the other thing is to preserve the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And that would mean retaining the SALT deduction and other, I think, great economy building aspects of that, which we all voted for. So that's the parameters of where we are. The other thing I would like to add is one of the legs to this stool is permitting. Our permits take too long, they're too costly, they're too complicated, and they end up not just costing time and money, but a lot of people walk away from the projects. And if we're going to really modernize and make sure that we're moving in a direction that we, I think, as Republicans and Democrats want to move, we've got to look at serious permitting reform. And so on that, I'm going to ask Senator Wicker if he would come up.
Well, thank you, Senator Capito, and also to Senators Barrasso and Toomey. It's been great to work with all three of these senators on this good faith effort and this serious effort to get negotiations started with President Biden and our Democratic colleagues in the House and Senate. I was fortunate enough to be in the Monday meeting in the White House with the President and Vice President. Some 10 days ago, there were other Republicans who met in the Oval Office on Monday of this week. Now, today, after talking to many of our colleagues, and particularly the three people behind me, I'm pleased to come forth 10 days after meeting with the President with an offer that really should address what most Americans think of as infrastructure. So, as Senator Capito said, what is infrastructure? It's highways, bridges, it's water and wastewater, it's ports and rail, airports, and certainly we're all agreed that broadband is part of it. So we take the part of the President's plan that most Americans agree is real hard infrastructure. We give it our touch, and we think we have a very good number here. Let me just also point out a couple of things. Congress is accustomed to working on infrastructure in a bipartisan way. The four committees that we represent here have time and again over the decades and in past years worked on infrastructure bill on a bipartisan way. And as Senator Capito said, there's legislation that we hope is pending in the next week or two with regard to some of this infrastructure. But examples of this would be the FAST Act, WRDA bills, FAA reauthorization, things that we've done by consensus over the years, and we think we can do again. This is a big proposal. $1 billion is a lot of money. $568 billion is a lot of money. Now, when we were doing COVID and the economy was skidding toward a depression, we talked in terms of trillions. But let's not forget that $1 billion is an enormous amount of money, and $568 billion is a very, very generous offer in dealing with infrastructure. It will get us a long way to where we want to go in a 5-year plan. I'm disappointed, though I guess not surprised, that some of our colleagues have rejected this before even seeing it. We got it to the President about half an hour ago. We hope he and his team are looking at it, and we think a number of our Democratic colleagues will want to negotiate with us about it. We're ready to start this afternoon. We're ready to put our staffs together this weekend here in the Senate and also with the White House. Let me say one thing about broadband. the $65 billion was arrived at in a considered manner. $81 billion was received from the C-band auction. $16 billion went for the cost that we expected, and that gives us $65 billion. If you take that $65 billion and add it to $40 billion that's already in the pipeline, that's already been passed by this Congress, it gets us very close to the president's $100 billion. And I think that is a most generous figure that we'll have a hard time spending, but I think we can spend it. If we get the maps right and we get the data correct, we can do that within the next 5 years.
Let me start by thanking Senator Capito for her leadership on this. I appreciate that very much. I think this is a very constructive proposal. And as you can see, it consists of actual, real infrastructure. What all of these categories have in common are the fact that they are the systems, the platforms that we all share for the purpose of moving people and goods and services throughout our economy. That's what the American people understand infrastructure to be all about. That's what they support, an increased investment in. And as Senator Wicker pointed out, this is a very large increase in Congress's traditional involvement in these areas. And while President Biden would like to do all kinds of things that have nothing to do with infrastructure, my view is we can have that discussion at some point in time, but what we ought to focus on is that which we seem to have agreement on, which is a significant investment in infrastructure. I think it's equally important that we think about how we pay for this. I think there's an idea that unites Republicans and hopefully appeals to many, many Democrats, which is let's do this without taking on still more debt. We've taken on a staggering amount of debt over just the last year. And my view is we should do it without damaging the tax reform that gave us the best economy of my lifetime. Remember, it was just a year ago, just before the pandemic hit, that we literally had the strongest economy of our lifetimes. We had record low unemployment rate, we had strong economic growth, we had rising wages, we had more job openings than there were people looking for jobs, and wages were growing most rapidly for lowest income workers. So we were narrowing the income gap, the wealth gap. At the same time, we were creating tremendous opportunities. That's a really good place to get back to. You don't get back there by ruining the tax reform that helped us get there. So that's what we should not do. Senator Capito touched on some of the ways that we can pay for this. And one of the ways we can do that is in some cases, especially when there's new capacity that we're creating, it's reasonable to ask the people who are going to use that capacity to contribute towards it. So some kind of user fee mechanisms make a lot of sense as a component. But there's also literally hundreds of billions of dollars that's already been approved, it's already been appropriated, but it's unspent, and it's unrelated to COVID. Some of that money can be repurposed. And thirdly, I would suggest that our states and local governments, let's remember, we didn't expect this, but in the end, 2020 was an all-time record year for revenue collected by state and local governments. And in addition to that, we sent them hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. Many state and local governments are flush with cash, and asking them to contribute their fair share towards infrastructure makes a lot of sense, and many of them are quite willing to do so.
Hey guys, did you know we have a podcast called WJ Live?
The Western Journal's mission is to equip readers with the truth, and that's the same mission we have on WJ Live.
You'll hear from writers, editors, and special guests on the most important topics of the day.
You can catch us Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern and 2 p.m. Pacific, right here at youtube.com/WJ Live.
While you're there, help us out by subscribing and hitting the bell so you don't miss any future episodes. See you there.